Welcome to CX Exchange Success Hour. Today's topic is beyond ChatGPT, what you need to know about AI and CS. And I'm super excited that Mariena has joined us to talk about this topic today. And just want to point out before we do an introduction to Mariena that when you download or make a copy, basically, of these slides, be sure to look for this link and also get the Gamma version, which is what we're going to be using today. But Mariena, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello. Well, before you do the presentation, just say hello. So we can actually see you. So take down the presentation for a second.
All right.
Wait, well, no, but we can still see the presentation.
Oh, it said screen sharing pause, so I thought maybe that would help.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Mariena. I'm an AI educator and consultant. So I work with companies to help train their teams, primarily large organizations, and work with them directly to enable AI automation and different solutions. I've been working in tech for close to 20 years, helping really most recently within the sort of enterprise SaaS space, companies that sell data and AI products, working directly with their customers and building teams of solutions engineers. So customer success has kind of always been a partner I've worked with a lot. And that's where I joined this community, was to continue to build those relationships with customer success, who I enjoy working with. And I'm based in Los Angeles. Yeah, and that's it.
Awesome.
I have a contact slide at the end, so if anyone wants to get a hold of me after the presentation, the very last slide does have some of that contact details.
And you're also in our Slack community, so it's very easy to get a hold of you that way too.
Absolutely.
And I didn't introduce myself because there's so many new folks. My name's Jan Young, and I founded CX Exchange. And otherwise, I like exploring new ideas. So here we are. So go ahead and share your screen, and let's dig in. Now, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We do want to make certain that we get to the breakout session, the breakout rooms. We'll try and do that for at least 10 or 15 minutes today, but we're going to have a lot of information to share. And also, I should just mention what we're trying to dig into with AI is making it more approachable. We're not expecting that you know about the tech. So if you have questions, and otherwise, I'm going to try and prompt questions as Mariena goes through this.
You're going to prompt engineering for talking to me. Yes. But getting the best results out of me.
Exactly.
I swear I'm a human. All right. So let's get started. So just to frame the conversation, I'm sure most, if not all of you, have used ChatGPT at this point. It's a conversation bot. You probably, with lots of maybe companies and their support, you've worked with AI and their bots, if they have maybe the old school chat bot or maybe the newer ones like ChatGPT that are more conversational and have natural language. So the goal of today is to go beyond that. And what we mean is that interface of how do you interact with a large language model and get it to generate text back to you, right? Whether you're writing a blog post or a song in the style of Eminem or whatnot, right? That's sort of the most foundational way you can use large language models, is generating text. And so the goal today is to talk about what are some of the patterns of ways that you can see AI products out in the wild and that you might use in your jobs, in your personal life, that can sort of take you to the next frontier, if you will, of where you can get even more benefits. Because if you've used the ChatGPT, you've probably seen, especially in the earlier years, some of its limitations. And so I'm going to talk about what each of those different products built on top of large language models, what limitations they address as well. So you can kind of see how they will allow you to really get more out of this technology. So these are the four that we're going to dive into. I'm going to go through them sort of at a very high level here And then what we'll do is we'll probably spend about 5 minutes on each of them. And that's really where, if you want to raise your hand and ask questions, will be the good time is kind of during that deep dive of each section. So just to introduce these, the first of these, and this is one you may have heard of, its short form is called RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. You can think of this as before I go to a large language model to generate text, I'm first going to do a query and get extra information. So if you've ever used a tool like Perplexity, which does a search before it gives you results and then it summarizes and has the citations, that's a good example of a RAG implementation. That one based on search. It can also be based on like a knowledge base. And so you'll see a lot of customer service platforms that have, they're not necessarily just using a large language model. They might be saying, hey, look at our user guides and our public training information for our customers. And that's sort of the source of truth, if you will. That's a RAG implementation. So that helps get over the fact that you might have information gaps where a large language model maybe wasn't including, say, some proprietary confidential company information when it was trained. It's going to now sort of augment that information that it has access to. And it actually also does a really good job at reducing hallucinations and sort of increasing the accuracy of the responses. Number 2 is text to SQL and data QA. These are technically two different architecture or ways of building products with large language models, but they're related, and I only have limited room, so we're grouping them here. But they're really ways that you can use large language models to interact with data, which I think is really interesting for customer success, because if you've ever had to work with an analyst or sort of defer what you could get on your own, these are technologies that can help make you more resourceful and be able to get more out of data that you have access to. And it's basically by using sort of regular language and converting that into SQL so that it can query a database, or using natural language to itself start to understand trends and try to answer questions about the data.
So can I just say, so that's like where you don't actually need to know how to program in SQL. You can just ask regular English or whatever language you're in, kind of talk to it, and it'll translate it into SQL.
Yeah. And you might have used this if you've ever uploaded like a report into ChatGPT as an attachment. That's sort of a scrappy way of doing something like this, is where you might ask a question about a report. So again, this is a way to address gaps in information, because now you're augmenting the large language model to have, say, external data, whether it's from a file attached or it's from maybe a connection that it has to a database. The third one we'll talk about is AI automation. If you've ever used tools like Zapier or Make, this is really an extension of those. To now they can not just sort of connect different systems and do sort of very simple rule-based stops within each of their workflows, but that you can augment them to actually use large language models to be more advanced and do things that require sort of a bit more quote unquote reasoning, as you'll hear. And this is what can allow a large language model to be more reactive. This is where you could set up monitoring, things like that are, not just kind of very strict and rigid, but that can actually, be more dynamic, for instance, and say reading the information, figuring something out, and possibly like writing an email then based on that, where you don't have to have maybe a hard-coded email template, but now you could say, let the LLM generate something based on what it sees. The fourth one is agentic workflows, and this is also secretly preparing you for next month's session. Or not so secretly, I guess, because cat's out of the bag. Next month, you're going to talk about agentic workflows. And this is sort of the most complex, and I would say the one that is the least immature, but also the most exciting. And this is really when you move beyond, sort of you doing something or setting up a workflow and actually having these agents that, for instance, have the ability to perform tasks, that have the ability to themselves break tasks down into sort of smaller pieces and go out and do things. And so we'll talk more about that one as well.
Before we dig in, can you maybe explain the difference between AI automation and agentic workflows? Is AI automation in a sense sort of agentic light, or is, in a way, or, I mean, obviously agentic, well, not obviously, but agentic workflows, as we'll dig into, actually have more capabilities, right? But they both have automation as part of what they do.
Yeah.
Would
The
that
way I think about the distinction is automation is more like I have a defined path from like X to Y, and how I get there, there's a piece of that that might be a call to an open AI, for instance, along the way. And so it's very well defined still. And it's still the person kind of implementing that automation that is very much saying, here's how you're going to solve this problem, micromanaging, if you will. An agentic workflow is going to be much more where you allow the sort of agent process, if you will, to figure out how to solve a problem. And what you're going to do is you're going to give it capabilities, or maybe the software you're working with, more likely. Say, if you were to have an SDR version of a workflow, it might have capabilities like, I know how to look for leads, I know how to score leads, I know how to do these different things. And then you're just going to give it different tasks, and it's going to execute and figure out how to do those things based on like knowledge it has of what to do. So it's almost like agentic workflows are more autonomous, and automation is more rigid, if you will.
got it? That's a great way to think about it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to now dig into each of these in detail, but just checking in. Is anybody like, what is AI? What does that stand for? Okay, just checking in. All right. Feel free to write in the chat if you have questions, if you don't want to come off mute. Okay.
Yeah, and I know instead of AI, I've been using the term large language model a lot. If you aren't familiar with the technology behind sort of this generative AI space, what often gets referred to as AI these days, in the resources, the appendix of this, there is a few slides that talk about how large language models are built, their strengths, and some of their limitations that can sort of help you wrap your head around more of the technology itself. So feel free to look at that offline.
Right.
All right, so let's start with RAG. This is the most basic use case, and this is the one that you'll probably see the most and be able to use the most yourself, especially. So this is a great starting point if you want to go beyond just regular plain vanilla ChatGPT. This is, as I mentioned, when the responses that you get back are based in full or in part on knowledge that was retrieved, that was queried. So it can be search, it can be a knowledge base. What it requires to work well, I would say, is a clean, reliable data set, right? That's kind of a prerequisite here. If you are, say, at a company where your Confluence or your SharePoint is just full of all kinds of old, junky data, maybe your documentation to your customers is full of duplicate information because maybe you've got 4 versions of a product, right? That's a good example of where now the AI isn't going to know if you ask it a question, do you want the answer based on a V1 implementation, a V2, a V3? And so it's going to have a hard time answering those. So, always start with cleaning your data first before you, move forward, for instance, with any of these enterprise solutions, because they are expensive. So let me back up though. You don't have to have an enterprise SaaS solution at your company to get a benefit from RAG and to be able to get the benefit of working with AI with your own data. The first thing you can do is use things like custom GPTs in ChatGPT, or you can use Claude projects. I believe both of these are only available if you're on the paid tier, the one that's like $20 a month. So you're not going to get it in free. But one of the things I always tell people is the great thing about a lot of these AI products on the consumer side is they don't lock you in for like annual deals. They're all month to month. I actually have moved between them. Sometimes I'll keep both and pay for multiple. Other times, like I cancel ChatGPT and move to Claude because the products they're moving quickly and they're innovating a lot. So Try it out for a month. If you don't like it, cancel it. But these features are really helpful because now you can basically upload a list of files. And so, you can pull down reports that you want to build, say messages from, information. If you have like at your company the team version, even better, but you're sort of manually uploading files. So I call this the scrappy version, or I said static knowledge base. That's what KB is, knowledge base, because everything you do here is sort of, it only knows about the version you upload. If you continue to change a file, you're going to have to download it again and re-upload it, right? It's not going to know changes.
Mariena, we did have one question here, is if RAG is where companies have their own AI instance. Is that how you would sort of think of it at all, or would you characterize it a little differently?
So conceptually, think of RAG as just, I'm going to give the large language model or the product a way to enhance the data that it can answer me and give me answers to my questions from. That's the concept. The implementation, there's sort of a static, like scrappy version, or you can use a product. So to answer the question, if your company is licensing Glean or Tetra or Coveo or like a Microsoft Copilot, those are all examples of enterprise grade ways of doing RAG. Because, for example, Microsoft Copilot, if you're a Microsoft shop, right, you're on SharePoint, you're using all the different Microsoft products to store your documents. Copilot knows what documents you have access to, and when you ask it questions in its business chat, it's going to look at all of the documents that it has access to, including even your Outlook emails. And so it's doing a retrieval, right, based on the questions you gave. Gemini actually now has this too on Workspace, if you're on Google Workspace, where it can access your emails and some of your documents. So that's an example of if your company is licensing those things and has it tied into like maybe your Dropbox. So Glean, for example, if you tied it into your Dropbox or your Confluence, they have integrations, right? Integrations with different places that your company might have its data. Now you can ask questions about those places that your data exists. And so that's the most user-friendly, the most seamless, right? You're not having to upload anything yourself.
And just time check, we're 25 minutes in.
Okay. But yeah, so if you've ever felt like ChatGPT isn't useful enough because it doesn't know enough, it doesn't have access to my information, start with uploading files, try these paid versions. You can organize projects around, different things that you're working on. So those chats reference that information, and that's a great starting point. And within your organization, advocate, I would say, for some of these solutions, because this is where you go beyond the terrible search experiences and now actually can get more of a way to interface with your files and your corporate information.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
All right, so sort of moving up the ladder now, text to SQL and data QA. We talked about some of these things as ways to interface with your data, right? So that you can actually talk through and brainstorm what trends, how do you explain different trends in your data, might be ways to interface more easily with a database. You're going to see this in a lot of products that have data. So you might not have AI product specific for this, but it's actually a feature. And so anything like Salesforce or HubSpot, they're building out these AI assistants that you might find within like reporting sections of those products. So if you know, like Salesforce, they have a way to build out reports. You might now have an actual module where you can go in and you can tell it what report you want to build, or you can ask it for certain types of data and it'll pull that. A lot of products, this is sort of a way they're going to continue to increase value to their customers. So this is customer success, might be something you hear about more if you work on any products that have data. This might be more of a feature, for instance, that you might roadmap. I will say this is one that is now going from RAG, is less mature as a technology. There's still a lot of research happening in this space. And so today you can only really ask questions that are very closely aligned to the data you have for it to work well. So a lot of times, if you think about the business questions that get asked, those have to be broken down, right, and tackled in multiple steps. The technology isn't today where you might be able to ask that sort of hard business question. You actually yourself have to break that down a bit and then ask each of those sub questions individually.
Yeah.
If you have the ChatGPT Pro, even if you're not a programmer, using their code interpreter, which you don't yourself have to say use code interpreter, you just kind of ask a question and it'll figure out on its own if you have it enabled to write code to solve your problem. It does a great job if you have a report at actually writing, for instance, the Python and doing the data analysis for you, generating reports. So that can be a good scrappy way on your own, even if you don't have options within the, your sort of corporate tool stack to these types of technologies.
And on that point, the December 17, 2024 session, which is on our YouTube and in the AI feed of our YouTube, and also listed on our resources on our website, goes into how to not only use it if it's generating Python code, but then how to turn that into Excel. And someone used it and had an in-depth example of how he used it to build a project. And it actually allowed him to build out a whole program to generate more revenue in the CS program. So, yeah, if you go to, we'll put the links again. If you go to our website in the resources page, that's where you're going to find it. So.
Yeah. And even if you don't code, look at the output, definitely validate it. It can make mistakes, but it can be a great way to, combine data sets to sort of clean data as well as do some basic analyses. And then to your point, Jan, bring that back in Excel where you could do something more advanced. So it's really a way to accelerate the work that you do, so that you can be more resourceful and do more on your own, especially if you have limitations and access to like data analysts on your team.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the third type of technology you can build with AI products we talked about is AI automation. I have a few examples of what you can actually do with AI automation here. So let's talk about some of those. The first one I think is sort of the most obvious, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is writing an email. So you can generate text. I've seen this a lot if you have automation that is doing like monitoring checks. A good example might be product usage. Maybe something hits a threshold in a drop in how often they were using a product. You might use that now to write an email to the customer or to do outreach, things like that. In the past, you would have really had to have a very templatized email that just sort of plugged in the name of the customer, right? And everyone got the same thing. The customer knew they were getting something that was very sort of generic and templatized. So it doesn't necessarily resonate very well. You can now actually personalize that email by giving some information about the customer, maybe their last interaction, so that that email is much more personalized versus a highly templatized version.
Yep.
Another way you could use it in automation is evaluation. So if you have an incoming email, for instance, you could ask the LLM to try to understand if the customer appears to be blocked, what urgency they seem to be articulating in the email, so that you could change your routing, for instance, of how that incoming email is routed, and whether or not it, for instance, comes in preemptively or calls someone in the middle of the night, things like that, right? Whatever the rule might be. Transformation. So good example, you could automatically take, say, your meeting notes coming in, a transcription, and convert those into an email that is going to go out to the customer that says, here's what we covered in the meeting. Maybe the ones that come, for instance, out of the box from tools like Fathom or Microsoft Copilot or are sort of very generic, right? So you might use AI automation to actually customize the way you take those meeting notes and articulate them back to the customer so that it feels more personal and it doesn't feel like they're getting something very generic. And some of these, by the way, I will mention, don't have to be fully automated. So if you've used any of these tools, the note takers, a lot of these you'll notice they're not perfect out of the box. I would never share this directly with my client without reviewing it. AI automation can also have a component called human in the loop. which really just means that you're going to give it to a human to review and potentially modify before it goes to the next step in the automation.
Yeah, we should speed it up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last two I'll cover real quick are extraction and enrichment. This is really if you wanted to sort of take information out of, say, meeting notes and try to find specific details, and maybe those get written into like a Salesforce, for instance. You could make it so that there's less data entry that needs to happen, right? That's always something that I think is hard in organizations. So that to me is a really interesting use case, is extracting out of like meeting notes or calls and putting that into different systems. So those systems are more up to date and require less time from humans to maintain. And then enrichment is somewhat related, but it's maybe based on the information I have. Now let me sort of derive new information from that.
And that's something where you can use tools to do that, or you could technically build it yourself from scratch, but there are tools out there that do these things.
Yeah. So on like the scrappier side, you know, you don't have to be.
Oh, you're going in and out, Mariena. We're losing you.
Oh, now?
No, we were hearing you kind of every other word.
Let me turn off my video.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off my video. Is that better?
We can hear you.
Okay. And you can still see the slides, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. ChatGPT recently launched Task and Operator. Operator's in the more expensive mode. So there's some ways you can start to play with this. But you know, the tools within an organization that are sort of building this out from scratch are going to be more robust.
Yeah. Awesome.
So let's move to our final one. So agentic AI. And I will say this technology is still pretty early. It has the most potential to be disruptive to how we work, but it is the earliest. So what we're going to talk about today, you know, it might change over time. I have less for you to do on your own, and so it's almost more, I feel like, conceptual right now, and we'll get into this more next month. But as I mentioned, you can think about agentic workflows in terms of, you know, what kind of tasks or capabilities does that agent have? What planning can it do? How can it break down requests? And then verification. How do I, as an AI agent, verify that I did the work correctly? And do I know how to resolve issues if there was a problem, for instance? And so that's what makes them a little more autonomous than the automation that we talked about on the previous slide. The examples of that today, I think on the scrappy side, is something like Google. When I wrote this, OpenAI's deep research had not come out. I don't know if you've heard of that one yet. It's only available in their $200 a month pro plan.
Yeah.
But both Google and OpenAI have a deep research agent, if you will, and it's going to go and look beyond sort of the public web for information. It's going to write a research paper and do citations. It's pretty robust. Operator from OpenAI has access to the internet and a browser. And so it can click and, for instance, make a reservation for you, things like that you could do from clicking around.
Oh, so that's where like the idea of an assistant comes into play. Okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of how you can think about this in the future. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm sure this is one that will make a lot of progress in 2025, is getting to a point where, you know, we might each have our own personal assistant that can do different tasks for us. Today, you can kind of do that. I think Google has had some products for a while, right, where you could have someone make a phone call on your behalf, right, to make a reservation, I think through Google Voice. But they've been kind of bespoke and sort of very nuanced use cases over the past few years. We'll start to see it become a bit more generic and more capabilities. And just before I close out, the more robust versions of this, like there's a ton of startups in this space right now. The big companies as well, like Salesforce, are investing, OpenAI as well, are investing a lot of time and money in building out agents. I think right now OpenAI is either just demoed or maybe there was like a sneak peek of a demo they're going to do for, I believe it's an SDR agent, where again, it's, how do we help companies by the things that are more tedious, maybe like finding new leads, right? Scoring those leads, some of those things that maybe are better suited to being done by a bot that can do those sort of quantitative tasks, or the tasks that are or more rote. Like, how do we start to leverage those so that we as individuals can bring our creative thinking, our critical thinking, all these things to the table, because LLMs can't truly be creative. And so when we kind of come together, that's where we'll be able to really achieve the best results.
So what kinds of questions do folks have as we've gone through these? We will go to a breakout where we won't expect you to be AI experts or anything, but what questions come up now that Mariena has gone through all of this? I know I've gotten to some of them over in the chat, but does it still feel like, what is it? Or is there something that might be able to help you attach it? Yeah, Trevor?
Yeah, it still feels a little bit like what is it? Not because I don't understand what's being presented, but just, like some of the tools I haven't had, hands-on time, or they're, more recent or whatnot.
Mhm.
Because it's difficult for me at least, without seeing like example, like a shadowing almost, to be
Mhm.
able to kind of piece together. The other question I have is a lot of these tools, that we have in each of our tech stacks across our various roles. A lot of them are trying to add AI to, different facets of each one. And so
Mhm.
like, I know that can cause a lot of problems because everyone's trying to find like either the all-in-one or something that kind of goes across multiple portions of the tech stack. I guess like, since you're the one advising and going about that, work, what do you sort of suggest for them when those kinds of questions come up, since pretty much everybody's trying to tap into this space to some degree?
Marina, did you have some thoughts on that?
I feel like I had a hard time following, I think, what the actual question was. Is the question like, how are like,
Well, so maybe a better way. So in like tech stacks, right? Like overall, we all see that a lot of our tools are starting to say, hey, we've got AI hit now and you
yep,
can do this or you can do that. And
yep,
like people, that usually comes with an associated charge and this and that, and it might not communicate
yep.
with other portions of the tech stack. I guess like when you've advised clients, like what do you kind of, direct them to as far as best practices of like, which tools to use when, where, are there ones that
Got it, got it.
overarch over other
Okay.
places?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I see yeah, I hear you now. Yes, all of the AI upsells are extremely expensive. And so it can be hard to figure out like which ones are going to be beneficial to the company and worth the investment. A client I work with right now, that's been exactly what they've been trying to figure out with Microsoft Copilot, because Microsoft charges an arm and a leg. And is it going to have the effect? Like, is the ROI there, right? Because these things aren't cheap. I always start with, like any software evaluation, what is the business impact you're trying to drive, and what problem is creating the most friction in your organization to getting to that business goal, right? Because it is AI even the solution? It may not even be AI. It might be something else. And is software the solution, right? So start there. And then from that, you can start to see which of these solutions are worth paying for, or actually going to have an impact for our organization. RAG is often the first one to start with too, because often you also want to experiment a little and start to see what you can get. So I find that that's usually for organizations where they start with, because
Oh, I think we lost your sound, Marina. Maybe if you stop showing the uh the slides. Here, tell you what. I
oh,
will.
stop the slides.
There we go. There we go. Okay, good. What were
Go
you
now.
saying then?
I was just going to say, like, the agentic stuff is more experimental and expensive. So go into those if you can, as partnership experiments, right? I think as an organization, they're riskier. So not wanting to get locked into like a, for instance, this is how much we're going to pay is what I would suggest. Doing proof of concepts, trying to see, does the technology actually work? And what is it capable of? So in general, evaluations are a good place to start, but you want to frame everything in terms of what business problem are you trying to solve so that you're focusing on the solutions that'll actually solve that business problem.
Great. Why don't we just put up the slide real quick, or maybe I can find it for the question that we're going to go to, and we'll just go out for 10 minutes so everyone can meet each other in smaller groups and discuss the topic. Are you going to slide 9 or that slide? Great. So which of these can you see being most impactful to your organization? And if you were going to set up an AI agent as your personal assistant, what would you want it to do? So that's what we want to bring up as discussion. Be sure to share your LinkedIn URL with each other, and then I'll bring you back in 10 minutes, and then we'll close together. So what came up?
Recipes. I said recipes.
Recipes, okay, good.
We were asking our ChatGPTs what they wanted to be named.
Okay, good.
And I think it's a kind of funny idea because it kind of just shows you what you are asking ChatGPT. My ChatGPT wanted to be named Sage Bite because they give advice and process data for me.
All right, interesting. I hadn't thought about asking ChatGPT what it would want to be named. All right.
Funny idea.
Trevor, what came up in your group?
We were just talking about different tools and kind of related to that question that I was speaking on about, tech stacks and where does it fit in? When does it fit in? When do you use it? When do you not use it? What are the limitations, policies, etc. So I can let the group speak on some of those because they had some good points. The thing that I'm still very curious about is a brief question for Mariena is obviously you're doing this when you're keeping up with tools that are emerging and coming out. Like, how are you doing it? I know there's like a couple aggregate sites that'll list tools, but to some degree now, like anyone can make like a tool, or is there another source that you use to like find these good tools or good, examples of these models and these ways of using it that you're talking about?
I subscribe to the Neuron as well as Superhuman just for daily AI news. These days, I feel like a lot of it can be very overwhelming and there's not always really interesting news, but both of them, I think at the bottom will have like tools to try. And that's how I'll kind of scan those sometimes and kind of see like what's coming out. They'll note if they're sponsored or not sponsored, but I find that's a good way to just sort of see some of the things that are being highlighted. And then even just going to sessions like this has been really helpful because in my breakout room, there were 3 tools we talked about that I didn't know any of them. And so, this landscape is huge. The amount of money and being invested in startups and what companies are doing, like it's, in the thousands, tens of thousands. So you can't keep up with everything, but, through newsletters and through talking to different people and communities, that's how you learn, like, what are some of the tools that are actually worth using, that are working for you. But, yeah.
Mariena, would you mind, in our Slack channel, we have an AI and CS channel in our workspace. Would you mind those 3 that you hadn't heard of, and also those 2 newsletters? Would you mind putting the links to those over in the Slack channel?
Yeah. And I'd encourage all of you, if you were in your breakout groups talking about different tools, we can use that as a good space so that people who aren't attending today, like, what are some of the tools that were talked about in your group that you'd either recommend or not? I can definitely share.
That'd be great. Yeah, for anybody, if there are things that came up, definitely put it over in that channel so we can continue the conversation there. What
Jen-
other thing? I should just mention, since we only have 2 minutes left, next session, we're going to, and we're doing this in mid-month, so you'll see on our calendar, you can opt in. So next month, we're going to have a few leaders, including Mariena, who will be speaking to agentic AI and how that's going to be developing and how we'll be able to use it in CS. And then in April, Mariena will come back and Gamma, where she was building out her presentation, can also be used to build websites. You can do portfolios if you're working on, like for your job search or otherwise just professionally want to maintain a portfolio, which is always recommended, whether you use it as a website or something that you just send out as a link. There's things like that you can build where it looks very professional and it's just so much easier. And also, as you go to even explore this Gamma version of the presentation, you'll see the difference of how Google Sheets is very linear, but there's actually, you can click on buttons and bring up different things, and it can almost become 3D in a sense in terms of how you build your presentations or things like that when you're using tools like Gamma. There's other AI tool versions as well, but Gamma is just one that is pretty far advanced in that area. So we thought it'd be fun to focus on that one. Any last thoughts? We are at the hour. Any closing thoughts you want to share?
Would it be possible, we were talking about getting some of these companies to demo for us because there's so many tools and platforms. Maybe one of the success hours, some of these companies could come and present to us.
Maybe not a success hour, because we usually do that around ideas, but maybe something like that. And Heidi, that would probably take a little bit of coordination and some outreach, things like that. And if you want to volunteer to help bring that together, we always love more contributions.
Okay. Well,
awesome.
I'll put that down.
Awesome. That's great. Well, good. So thank you so much, Mariena. Just really did appreciate, this whole process of bringing this together and just everything you presented today and just all of your contributions in our community. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you everyone for your contributions today. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.